Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies and Man once again, and today we're doing another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. Today we are looking at Conan number 19. Sorry, I was going to say 11. It's number 19 with this gorgeous, awesome, super cool Rob Del Torre cover. This is the start of a new arc. I think it's supposed to be a 2-issue arc, and this is drawn by Doug Braithwaite. Obviously, it's still being written by Jim Zub, and this opens up basically right after the death of Belit. Conan is still feeling the sharp pain of her loss, and he actually arrived at, basically Hyborian Africa, right? The Stygian continent, and he lights fire to Belit's ship, the Tigress, as a funeral pyre, and then he moves into the jungle. And he traverses the jungle for basically months, it seems like. And, well, because he's Sumerian and he's used to the cold, the jungle ends up being kind of a treacherous kind of situation for him to traverse, right? He is constantly exhausted and worried and sweating out all of, his life water, basically. And he has to deal with these bugs at one point. And, well, it does seem like it's probably something he rarely has to deal with. I don't know. In the history of Conan, if this is the first time he's gone to Stygia or into the Kushite jungles in the stories, right? I'm sure he has quite a lot, right? Especially in his pirating days. But I can't remember if Belit's the first time he's a pirate or kind of in the middle, or like if he ever actually ends up going into the jungles before, right? I can't remember a story where he does, but I haven't read all of it. So he's definitely struggling a lot. He gets attacked by a bunch of bugs. I think it's kind of like some sort of, wasp nest that he accidentally deals with. He ends up in the water, and then he has to fight a freaking crocodile. And that's awesome. This story, or this kind of portion of the story where he fights a crocodile, does kind of last very shortly. It doesn't last long enough for me to really feel excited about it, in the sense that, like, I would have really liked it to be kind of longer, right? It would have been interesting if the crocodile goes into a death roll, and Conan is like trying to struggle to stay on it, right? He doesn't really, he struggles a little bit, but it's not like the main fight that he has in this issue. So it ends up kind of pretty quickly. He stabs it through the head, basically through the mouth, and that makes it bleed out. I guess that's possible, but I feel like if a crocodile gets stabbed through its mouth, it doesn't necessarily kill it. I feel like I've seen crocodiles that have or I've heard of crocodiles that have managed to survive even with, quite debilitating injuries like that. Because my understanding is that crocodiles are very, very powerful, right? But it doesn't really matter. I just feel like they should have been drawn a little bit differently, where the sword goes through, like, between its eyeballs instead of, like, through its mouth, if that makes sense. Just to make it more clear. Because otherwise, it feels like maybe it could have survived. And eventually, Conan crawls out of this swampy area and just lays down in the mud and rests. Eventually, he does wake up, and he realizes that he's being hunted. He doesn't know by who or what. He can't really tell. And the figure that Doug Braithwaite kind of paints is really cool because it's nebulous. It looks kind of like an animal, and it also kind of looks like a person that's crouching. And I think that Doug Braithwaite's artwork here has been really, really awesome. I've really, really enjoyed it. I think it's super cool. And so Conan continues. And eventually, he finds himself at the edge of this village, and he tries to go in there and try to trade with them, but they don't want him. They think that he has death with him. Now, when I read this initially, I thought this was because of Belit, right? He has sadness, and because he's the type of person he is, anywhere he goes, death follows, right? And I don't necessarily think that was the case. I don't know that this is what they were thinking, but Conan does feel kind of like upset that they don't let him in. But of course, he decides that he doesn't want to kill them, and so he leaves. And eventually, he manages to make himself a camp at the edge of a cliff. And the reason he does this is because if he stays there, the person that's hunting him will eventually have to show up, right? And this is like kind of like the right moment for them to do so. And it is also the best place for Conan to be if he gets attacked, because this way he'll have clear visibility of them, right? And so as he's sleeping, suddenly a black panther attacks, and it shows up and has these glowing orange yellow eyes, and he has a fierce battle with it, and it's so awesome. I love seeing Conan deal with jungle cats. I think it's so cool. Like, he fights lions and tigers and panthers and all this stuff. All of this like is really cool. I quite like it. It reminds me a lot of Tarzan in these moments, and I love that. I think that it's really great. And the fight is awesome. I think that the way Doug drew it is great. And Conan manages to slice a little bit of its ear off, and then the tiger, or the panther, makes a mistake, and he throws both of them off the side of the cliff. And when they both fall, Conan is attacked. He's constantly trying to fend off this animal, right? And as he's doing this, he's remembering Bellet, and he's remembering his love for her, and the fact that if he dies, Bellet dies with him, right? And so he's not going to allow that. Not now, not ever, right? And so he manages to gain some resolve. He grabs a stone, and he starts pummeling the shit out of the panther. And when he, finally gets up, he starts talking. He realizes that this thing is not just an animal. There's something more to it, right? And as Conan speaks, the animal transforms into a person. And this person ends up being Zula, the brother of Beast, the guardian of the grasslands. And he says that his soul will not rest until all serpents are slain. And I guess that means that Conan has touched the serpent or in some way been affected by it. And I thought this was awesome. There is a bit of an issue that I have here with the timing of certain stories. If that makes sense, like, we just had Conan dealing with a shape-shifting Catman in the Savage Sword, and then immediately have to deal with it in the normal Conan story. And that's not necessarily bad. I don't necessarily think it's a problem, in and of itself, right? If you're someone that only reads one or the other, it's really never going to be a big deal. But when it comes to someone like me who's reading it as it comes out, these sort of things end up kind of destroying the illusion a little bit, because if Conan went through this with Bellet, and then he also goes through it with, what's his name? The cat guy from the Savage Sword of Conan, that means that he should have recognized that something was going on, that he would have known what it was, right? And obviously, because the stories are written independently, that's not the case. They don't know that these are happening, right? And so Conan doesn't reference back to the time that he fought the Panther Man in the Kushite jungle when he's in Vendaya fighting against the Tiger Man, right? And so what happens is that you end up kind of feeling this the break of the illusion, which is that Conan has had all of these adventures one after the other, right? And that's usually not a problem, because most of the time you can just rationalize it away, right? Like, it's okay. He maybe just forgot in the heat of the moment or whatever. But when you're plugged in and you realize and it kind of does make the illusion a little bit less easy to swallow, if that makes sense, right? And so it kind of breaks the immersion a bit, and that's kind of not great in my opinion, right? If you're a constant reader of Conan, you might not care, because this is kind of how the character works, right? But it is something that bothers me a bit, because it's something that I'm not really that used to, right? When you read manga, most of those characters exist in a single timeline, and if there is ever a spin-off or something, it's either after or before, and so there really is rarely any opportunity for the immersion to break. With comic books and superhero characters and characters that have long histories, that's kind of a lot more difficult, right? And currently I've been struggling with Aquaman and the Justice League Unlimited series, where the characters in both of them and having completely different stories that don't tie in at all, and still having these adventures kind of happen at the same time, right? And so this is kind of what kind of led to me feeling like the immersion was broken in this issue a little bit, right? Just the fact that there's two stories that are happening at the same time in different time periods of Conan's life that are basically exactly the same, and he doesn't mention them at all, right? To himself or to the other characters, right? Like, I don't know, it is what it is. It's not that big of a deal, but it does bother me just a tiny bit, right? And I'll stop talking about that, because I feel like I just mentioned the same thing over and over again. But overall, this was a great issue. I really had a great time with it. I love the work that's being put in. I really appreciate Jim's narration in this one. I think that he's doing a great job with making the narration interesting and exciting, and also giving Doug Braithwaite a lot of space to really draw whatever he feels like drawing, right? And it's really great. I really liked it. I'm, not the biggest fan of Diego Rodriguez as the artist. I don't necessarily like the way he colors in Doug Braithwaite's work, but in this case, I thought it was good. There was very little of that orange stuff that he likes to do with light. And most of the jungles are very green and blue, and they look quite beautiful. And I really, really like that. So usually the issues that I have with Diego Rodriguez don't really exist in this at all. So there's really nothing to complain about in terms of that. And Doug Braithwaite's artwork is great. I really like the way that he incorporates Conan, like having a bunch of like nasty scars and kind of just looking dirty a little bit, if that makes sense. And I think it's cool. It's interesting. It's a bit different from usual, right? I think that normally Conan is drawn in this very clean way, even though he is this crazy barbarian, right? And I like that Doug Braithwaite takes the time to draw in a lot of these kind of moments, right? Kind of stories across his skin, if that makes sense. And it's really, really cool. And obviously the introduction of Zula was awesome as well. I quite like that. I didn't know much about this character, and so of course Jeffrey Shanks, friend of the channel, does an article about Zula the Warrior, Wizard of Shambhala. And this is part 19 of his series, obviously, because this is issue 19. And this one, he talks about the fact that Conan usually doesn't have companions, right? He has them for a little bit here and there, but usually they either die, they're one-offs, or they don't really matter beyond the first story. However, in the 1960s with Elspride de Camp, that kind of changed a little bit, where they introduced certain characters to become relevant to Conan's band, or basically become Conan's band across the different stories that they talk about, right? And he mentions Juma the Cushite and Sigurd Redbeard, who is a Vanir pirate. And later in the comic books, we get introduced to Zula, the warrior wizard from Darfar. And apparently this was introduced in Roy Thomas's Bellet arc in Conan the Barbarian 84. And this guy is basically a shapeshifter, right? He can imbue himself with the power of animals, and he turns into this Black Panther, right? And he becomes relevant across a lot of different stories, apparently. He also teams up with Red Sonja at some point. And it's interesting that he stops appearing in the stories in 2000 with Roy Thomas and Jeff Isherwood's Flame and Fiend. And then he also happens to appear as a female character in Conan the Destroyer. I did not know that. That's cool. That's very interesting to know. But she doesn't really do any magic in that. And, Jeff mentions that as well. And now he gets reintroduced into the story thanks to Jim. And they also have this interesting RPG character sheet for you to use in the Conan the Hyborian Age RPG. So I think that's cool. That's pretty interesting. I wonder if they're going to make one for Conan himself. I can't remember if they did one last time in the last issue, because I still don't have that physically. I only have it digitally in an eARC format. And so it's not exactly what it gets printed, right? So, yeah, but overall, great issue. I love this. I thought it was great. I really, really enjoyed it. What did you guys think about it? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and see you guys later.